Phil Steele, Phil Steele's magazine. If you guys don't know the magazine, you should. This is basically one of the starting of football. This is the magazine that's out right now. Phil Steele's College Football 2023 preview. It's 350 pages. I've been talking to Phil about betting. I'm 46. I don't want to date Phil, but like I've been talking to him for a long time about betting because he's done betting in this book for a long time. He has his own language, his own shorthand. It's very cool what he was able to put together. And Phil Steele's been kind enough to join us here on the Bostonian versus the book. Now, this looks a little different, I know. But Phil, Matt, and Dave, can you hear us, sir?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
You sound phenomenal.
Phil sounds like he's got a great microphone. Phil, you look great on the picture that we're using, and you sound fantastic. So can you hear us? This is good?
Right now, you're just breaking up a little bit there. It was like pausing a little bit.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, let's hold it together, P-Roll. Can we do it?
I think we can do it. I think
okay, let's do it.
Yeah, we haven't done audio before, so this is the first time we've done audio only with just a picture, so I think we're okay. But Phil, let's start with just the overall work that goes into the magazine, the number of hours you guys put in to put together this magazine. How difficult, how long do you guys spend getting this thing together?
You know, we start, I do the magazine in a 3 write-through process. And the first, we start the Sunday after Thanksgiving, which is when some team's season is complete. And the first write-through process involves the postseason. And I've just watched every game all season long. I'm all familiar with the team, but I go back and read every single article that was written about the team for the whole year. So I get in depth on every single position on every single team and do the first write-through. And in the first write-through, I address, you know, what kind of shape are they heading into last year? What happened last year? And what kind of shape are they for next year? The second write-through process is pre-spring, which was when the rosters come out and we get the transfer portal moves all updated, and I update the writing that time. And then the third is after talking to the head coaches. And this year I talked to 122 of the 133 head coaches, generally spend about an hour with each one going over the entire team. I send them my team pages with every single player on, all my notes, all the stats, and then ask them for strengths and weaknesses, put the position in order, and tell me how they feel about the position overall. It's a 7-month process. It starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and it ended June 7th this year. We had to actually move it back because of the fact of the transfer portal. The transfer portal closed May 15th. We had to capture where all those players went, so I gave it 3 weeks. I feel we captured about 99% of where the players have landed. So it's a long, arduous process, but well worth it in the long run.
Phil, when you look at the futures in the book, and you know when we used to do them in the book, it's always about the SEC, and then which team in the Big Ten, whether it was going to be Ohio State or Michigan, was going to win it, and worry about the playoff. But there's other teams in other conferences. I mean, the book is gigantic. There's more information in that book, concise, all over the place. What is a conference or two that, like, after talking to all these coaches and stuff, do you think people should pay attention to that they're probably not paying attention to in the mainstream media?
Well, I think there are, once you get outside the Power Five, I don't think folks spend as much attention looking at those teams. And I think that's where you find a lot of value. I know during the season, being here in Ohio, very much in MAC country, the MAC I find is great value during the season if you're not following along with it. And this year, maybe the conference that might get the most value is CUSA, because they had a team like Sam Houston State, Jacksonville State. Who knows anything about them? Well, I give you the same amount of coverage on Jacksonville State and Sam Houston that I do in Alabama and Ohio State. 2 full pages, everything you ever needed to know about those. And I think that CUSA is a while probably the weakest of the conferences heading into the year. A lot of folks don't feel the need to follow them. If you follow those conferences, I think you get a solid advantage. So to me, it's always not the national TV game, not the one that's 1 against 5 this week. Everybody knows everything about that game. Right. Go find the teams that nobody cares about, and that's where you find your value.
The shorthand that you have for the book, has that ever changed? And how long did it take you guys to create this language that basically you need a decoder sometimes to figure out with how much information you're putting on those 2 pages?
Yeah. And, you know, the good thing about the abbreviations, I remember when I started them back in 1995, when the book came out, It was tough to for some people to digest all those abbreviations. Naturally, if you've had the magazine for years, you pretty much know all of them. But the thing I like is now that everybody's texting on their phones, everybody's abbreviating stuff. So I mean, now you got all kinds of abbreviations out there, and I think now today's youth definitely know abbreviations and probably figure it out much quicker than people did back in 1995.
Phil, the kids abbreviate everything. I have 3 daughters myself, and I think it's a different language. So they'll figure out the information's all there. They'll get to it. Speaking of information, all right, we talk about it all the time. The space is all over it. The Heisman Trophy. It's Caleb Williams' to lose, basically. But in all of this, again, setting up this amazing guide and looking at all this stuff, it's a betting market. And there's guys like Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., Quinn Ewers. Is there anyone that you kind of think might have that value that isn't named Caleb Williams to win the Heisman?
Yeah, and first of all, what kind do you got the numbers in front of you?
I do.
What's Sam Hartman at right now?
I'm gonna go down the list a little bit here, Phil.
Hartman.
18-1 right now at FanDuel.
Okay. That's probably a good one to look at because I think Notre Dame's an under the radar team. And as you know, if you're a quarterback for an undefeated team or one that's in the playoff mix at the end of the year, you have that opportunity. Hartman's going to have his chances this year. Now, last year they had a backup quarterback. Remember, their starter went down to injury. Now they've got one of the best quarterbacks out there in Sam Hartman. And what a supporting cast. You look at the running back core, they go 4 or 5 deep there. In fact, they moved Chris Tyree to a slot position because they're so deep at running back. The offensive line is one of the best in the country. A defense, one of the best. They get Ohio State at home week 5. If they can win that game, boom, he's going to be way up the charts. They get USC at home, head-to-head, Caleb Williams. Notre Dame, the home team is actually won, I believe, 8 of the last 9 in that series. Colder weather in October. Notre Dame wins that thing. Who do you pick? Do you pick Caleb Williams? Do you pick Sam Hartman? I'm going Hartman at that point. So I like the odds at 18-1. And if I was betting, if I was betting Caleb Williams or the field, I would take the field. There's a reason the Heisman winner can't repeat. Number one, they're not only competing against everybody else in the country, but they're competing against their stats from last year. And Caleb Williams last year threw for 4,537 yards, 67% completions with a 42-5 ratio. If he has anything less than that, people will say he has a down year. So he's competing against himself. He's competing against the others. I'd go with the field over Caleb Williams.
How about that? I love the Hartman pick. It's interesting.
Wait, the follow-up question.
Yeah.
Phil, do you think Notre Dame's going to make the playoff? Like, are we going to have to listen to this Notre Dame fight song for real? Like, this is going to be, are they going to be good?
I think there's a reason that Hartman's 18-1 is because nobody's really expecting it. But yes, they will be good. As mentioned, last year was Marcus Freeman's first year, and he actually lost his first 3 games as a head coach. Remember, he dropped the bowl game, which they blew a big lead on, and then all of a sudden went 9-2 down the stretch. They have the defense, they have the run game, they have one of the best special teams, and I love their schedule. Even if they lose to Clemson on November 4th, which is the only game I have an underdog in all year, if they take care of business at home, they go 11-1, and I think an 11-1 Notre Dame with wins over Ohio State and USC makes the playoff this year. So I give them that shot. I didn't pick it in the magazine, but we're talking value here.
Right.
And that's why I went with the 18-1 for Hartman.
You think they'll be favored against Ohio State?
I've got the game pick 'em
Okay.
Right now they're an 8.5-point dog against Ohio State, but not for me. I always look at the Vegas number and I look at my number. I've got the game of pick 'em because you've got a first-year starting quarterback for Ohio State making his first real road start. They do play Indiana prior to that, but Ohio State usually has a crowd advantage at Indiana.
Right.
And they're going to have a decent amount of crowd here, but it's going to be his first real test in front of a hostile crowd and a hostile defense.
How about that? So look, I started doing heavy college football conversations when I moved to Alabama back in 2001. And Bama was horrible. I saw 5 coaches in 4 seasons. I saw Alabama fans just be furious in the Mike Dubose, Mike Shula, Mike Price eras that I had to cover. It's been a long time since Alabama's been bad. Alabama, and I think we saw it with Paul Feinbaum this morning on ESPN, bringing up the legacy for Nick Saban, that his legacy's on the line because of how things have gone the last couple of seasons. I'm equally down on Alabama this year. I don't think they make the college football playoffs, but where are you in Alabama and that big question at quarterback?
I think if you look at Alabama on paper, you say they're in trouble this year. I mean, they only have 5 starters back on offense, 5 on defense. They really do have a legitimate quarterback battle. I, by the way, went with Tyler Buckner, even though I think Milroy might have the slight lead right now. Buckner knows the offense. He played in Tommy Rees's system at Notre Dame. He's got starting experience, been in big games. I think he can win the starting job. But you look at the experience chart. They go from number 52 on my experience chart last year to number 127. There's a lot of signs pointing down. But the factors pointing up would be, look at their 2 losses last year. They lost to Tennessee by a field goal, and they lost to LSU in overtime by a single point. And that was a horrendous year for Alabama. They finished number 5 in the country, 11-2, just horrendous overall. You got Nick Saban. You have all that talent. You're two real tough games. Texas and Tennessee are both at home, and Alabama's been playing less on the road than they have at home. They've been vulnerable on the road. Look at, they barely won in the Swamp 2 years ago. They lost at College Station. They barely won the Iron Bowl on the road. Last year, they lose to Tennessee on the road. They lose to LSU on the road, both close losses. And they also struggled against Texas on the road. So at home, they don't have that problem. They get Tennessee and LSU at home. They do have to play A&M on the road in College Station, which I like that game a lot. That's another one of those where Alabama's an 8.5-point favorite right now. I've got the game at Pick'em. Remember, A&M last year, it was at the Alabama 2-yard line at the end of the game in a 5-7 season with a chance to win down by 4. And now they get them at home in College Station where they beat them last time. But I'm not betting against Nick Saban. So I would have to say I picked Alabama to make the playoff just because he has won 1 national title when he's been preseason number 1. They've been preseason number 1 each of the last 2 years. The last time they were not preseason number 1 was 2020. Bing, national title. So I'm not that's discounting Saban, but I understand your point of view. On paper, you look at Alabama and you say they're very vulnerable this year.
Phil, give me some good news on Penn State. Pete Ralt here, bet over 9.5 wins. I went to Penn State. I want Penn State to make the playoffs so bad. I want them to beat both Ohio State and Michigan in the same season. I don't know if it can happen, but they're going over 9.5 season wins, aren't they? I mean, this might be the year to Franklin gets them into the playoff, right? Like maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I think this might be James Franklin's best team that he's put on the field. You look at them; they're number 62 on my experience chart. When I went over the team with Coach Franklin, he said the offensive line is one of the best offensive lines he's had there. You look at them defensively. The thing that stood out to me defensively with this, guys, is their depth. They go 3 deep at basically every single position on defense. Players like Alonzo Ford, who transfers in from the Old Dominion, who is a really good player, all conference type of player there. He's third string. They have a lot of third stringers that would be starting in a lot of other places. Each of their 3 units on defense rank in my top 5 in the front of the magazine. I think Drew Allar steps in and does well at quarterback. And you look at the games this year, the road games are Illinois winnable because Illinois is not up to last year's standards. Northwestern, very winnable.
Yes.
Maryland, winnable. In fact, Penn State usually travels pretty well there.
Yes.
And then Michigan State's being played in Detroit. The one that stands out is naturally Columbus, where they're playing Ohio State. I do think that they probably dropped that game, although they've given Ohio State a great test almost every single year. They get the big game against Michigan at home. They almost beat Michigan at home 2 years ago. Michigan needed that late score to pull out the win.
Yes.
So I've got Penn State a favorite in every game. I've got the Michigan game a toss-up, and I've got Ohio State a dog, but I've got them. I would put the total at 10.5 for them. So I think 9.5 is a good number to go over. And if they go 11-1 with only a loss at Ohio State, don't you put them in the playoff at the end of the year if they're 11-1?
I hope so. I think you should be on the committee. So I like it. That's good.
So let's stay in the Big Ten because I am extremely high on Michigan this year. I think Michigan is going to win the national championship this year because I think the C's are right for Michigan, given what Bama's dealing with, what Clemson's dealing with, what we're seeing with Ohio State. I love the offensive line. I love J.J. McCarthy. I love the fact that Blake Corum's back. I think the defense is going to be extremely nasty. What is your outlook on Michigan this season?
I did pick Michigan to make the playoff this year and win the Big Ten. I got to be honest with you. When I looked at it, I had Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, all within gap. And I'm like, I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to go with whoever gets the other two at home. Guess what? They all play one of the others on the road.
Right.
So it made it much more difficult for me. Of the three teams, Michigan has the best schedule. You look at their non-conference schedule, and East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, give me a break. And then you look at their scheduled in-conference play: Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan State, Maryland, all fall in the winnable category. They get Ohio State at home, and then that Penn State game, as I noted, I rated that one a toss-up. I'm really anxious to watch that game. I think it's going to be just like the last time Michigan traveled to Happy Valley. But I feel this is Jim Harbaugh's best team. They have playoff experience. They've got to the playoff each of the last 2 years. They know what it takes now to get over the hump and win it all. So I think if Michigan's going to win a national title under Jim Harbaugh, this would be the year to do it.
Took a question here from, look at him smiling. I wish you could see him smiling. He's smiling from ear to ear. It's so annoying. So we got a lot of people watching the show live right here on, at Boston versus the Book, and they're all over the country. We got someone that I asked them for a question to ask Phil, and they said, do you feel that the Gamecocks can compete in the new look SEC? There's a lot of people talking about this team, like, after their success last season, and when can South Carolina make some noise in there?
They're going to make some noise, but I don't consider them a legitimate contender in the East, unfortunately. When I look at South Carolina, I did pick them third, and I think they're a strong pick for third in the East behind Georgia and Tennessee.
Okay.
But South Carolina lost a lot. They've only got 6 starters back on offense, 4 on defense. They're number 82 on my experience chart. And keep in mind, last year in SEC play, they were actually minus 80 yards per game. Now, generally, if you're minus 80 yards per game in conference play, you're something like 2-6, and they finished 4-4 last year. They do have the great equalizer, which is special teams. Pete Lembo's their special teams coordinator. Shane Beamer knows special teams because his dad was there. They had my best special teams in the country last year. They've got my best special teams in the country this year. And if Rattler plays like he did at the end of last year, then they're pretty good at quarterback. But I don't think the overall talent is quite there this year. They do get Florida at home. They do get Kentucky at home, which is why I picked them third. I think they win both those games. But I think it's more of like a 7-5 year for South Carolina, although Shane Beamer's gone over both his first 2 years. Remember, I think the over-under total on him the first year was 3.5. They get 7. Last year, what was it? 5.5, 6.
I was going to say 6. They had to go over 500.
Yeah, and when they were 6-4, you're like, well, they are not going to get there because they've got to play Tennessee and Clemson in the final 2 games. They're going to lose them both, right? Yeah. And then they go and beat them both and drub Tennessee. So Shane Beamer's always going to outperform expectations. So if I project 7 for South Carolina, they probably get 1 more at least.
Phil, Georgia has become the new Alabama where they don't, reload or restock, they reload and keep going. But what do you make of Georgia this year, given what they lost off last year's team, the number of first round and second round picks that are off that roster coming back in here? Is Georgia back in the postseason, or is this a window for somebody else?
Let me ask you a question. What was Carson Beck's current number for the Heisman?
Carson, let's see, 18-1, sir, right now.
Same 18-1. Okay.
Same, yep, at FanDuel, a little bit higher, 20-1 at this other book that I'm looking at. But yes.
Now last year when I went over Georgia, you looked at their defense. They lost like 8 or 9 draft picks, most of them first rounders.
Right.
And you're like, what's going to happen? And going over the team last year, their concern was the overall experience level. They said, we like the talent. We're not wild about we like the depth of the talent, but no experience. Now, this year, they only lose 5 NFL draft picks. I mean, they go from losing 3 first rounders up front to 1. So they are actually more experienced defensively than they were heading into last year, with less question marks on the defensive side of the ball. They have my number 1 offensive line in the country. Whoa. They have my number 4 set of receivers, number 6 running backs. Your biggest question would be Carson Beck. However, Carson Beck was my PS number 6 quarterback coming out of high school. He is a guy that is 6'4", 215, and it's his 4th year in the system. He's surrounded by talent. And then look at the schedule, guys. Georgia's going to be a double-digit favorite in each of their first 10 games. So now the big game comes at Tennessee, right? Well, you don't have a first-year quarterback anymore. You got a guy with 10 starts under his belt that's been through the gauntlet. Then I think Carson Beck can have a big season this year with that supporting cast. And if you're the quarterback for the number one team in the country, you have a great shot of winning the Heisman Trophy. Get back to those 18-1 odds. So I think Beck's right up there with Hartman as far as a value play. I do see Georgia back in the playoff. I believe this team could be just as good, if not better, than last year's team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Whoa. And they're my pick to win it all this year.
Here we go.
So another question coming from the audience. This is part of the benefit of the show. They fire these questions. I said, ask Phil a question, and they're asking random questions. They want to ask you about Old Dominion. I'm not going to punish you and ask you about.
No, you can. You can. We talk about Old Dominion.
Are you serious?
Oh, we'll talk about any team in the country. I talk to every head coach. I talk to every single group of 5 head coach out there. Spent over an hour going over their team with them. So I can talk in length about Jacksonville State if you want to.
Well, that's good to know. I looked at the MAC conference because the people love the MACtion. They love
Tuesday,
the
Wednesday
Tuesday nights and the Wednesday night games late in the season. And so I'm looking at MAC conference championship game winner odds right now. Toledo, the number 1 choice. Ohio, the 2nd choice. And then Buffalo's the 3rd choice, but a long way away. And Miami, Ohio behind them, Eastern Michigan then behind them. And then there's not even a consideration for any of those other schools. Is it pretty much a done deal that it's going to be either Toledo or Ohio to win that conference?
I don't like Toledo to win the conference odds because they're too short for me.
Yes.
But what's your over-under on Toledo?
Oh, I got to find that right now.
I'll talk about them while we're going over it, and then I'll give you a long shot for the conference. With Toledo, Jason Candle every year recruits the best talent. He's always bringing in the best recruiting class every year. Last year, they finally played up to that level for the entire year. Didn't worry about the injuries. 8 starters back on offense, 8 on defense. DeQuan Finn, I'm surprised somebody didn't poach DeQuan Finn from one of the Power 5s that needed a QB because this guy's exciting, both running and throwing the football. They're strong in the backfield with Stewart and Kelly. They've got a tremendous receiving core with Maddox, Aziris, and Newton. And the defense is one of the more underrated defenses in the country. I have Toledo actually favored in 11 or 10.5 games this year. I've got the Miami of Ohio game, a toss-up. Illinois, they're an underdog. That's why I like the total. I believe it's something like 8.5. Is that what you found?
There's a 9, and I didn't look at the other book. I actually found an interesting bet to go undefeated this season. FanDuel has Toledo listed at 31-1. They're not going undefeated, are they?
I wouldn't. I think there's probably better odds out there. The Illinois game is going to be tough on the road to start out the season.
Okay.
And generally, if they do go undefeated, that means at the end of the year, they've got a couple of road games in the MAC on these Tuesday, Thursdays. They'll have their division locked up, which makes the game meaningless. What they did last year is they got to those final 2 games of MAC play. They had the division locked up, and then they rested DeQuan Finn, who was banged up, and they lost 2 games down the stretch. So I would not make that wager. Okay. Now, if you're looking for a long shot, what are your odds on Northern Illinois this year?
Oh, wow. I like it.
Shot to win that. Let's see. Northern Illinois right now are. Oh, I changed the page. Let me find it.
Should be phenomenal. They were 3-9 last season.
Right.
Northern Illinois?
Yeah.
Right here, 30-1.
I like Northern Illinois' chances. I think
How
they
about
have that opportunity. They've got the offensive line.
Wow.
Last year they lost a lot of close games. It's not like they were getting grossly outplayed on the field. In fact,
new quarterback,
they were only minus 2 yards per game in MAC play. Hammock's got one of these things where it's like up, down, up, down. They were 2 years ago, they were 9-5. Last year they dropped to 3-9.
Okay.
They do have to play Toledo on the road, but I think when you look at their schedule, if they can pull one of those upsets, and Northern Illinois has pulled road upsets. Last year, they upset both Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan on the road. I think they're worth a look as a long shot in the MAC this year.
Who's their quarterback? Is it new? Or is it
No. Their quarterback 2 years ago was Rocky Lombardi from Michigan State, and then Lombardi got injured last year, I think after like 3 or 4 games and missed the majority of the season. Lombardi's back, so they've got that veteran leadership, and now the guys that were thrown into the fire, like Ethan Hampton and Cremascoli, those guys all have starting experience now, so they're much deeper at the quarterback position, and that was part of their 3-9 struggles last year.
Yeah, Phil, last one for me. P-Roll, let me just throw this one in there because, Phil, you're a Cleveland guy, right?
That's correct. Cleveland, Ohio, born and bred.
I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, PA. I'm not that I don't like you, but Cleveland is one thing and Pittsburgh is another. I don't know if you've heard, but the Browns are wearing these whiteout uniforms 3 times this season. They're wearing them at Pittsburgh. The uniforms are they're going to get very dirty in Pittsburgh, but they're wearing white helmets for the first time in 70 years. And Cleveland, there's a lot of hope in Cleveland. Don't be a homer, Phil, but who's going to win more football games this year, the Cleveland Browns or the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I'm going to throw something interesting at you, and that is this college football preview magazine is a labor of love. I work on it all year round, right?
Yeah.
I actually stopped watching the NFL 2 years ago. Sunday mornings, all day Sunday, I actually am watching college football replays. So I don't even look at the NFL anymore. I couldn't tell you very much about the NFL. It's because I'm completely devoted to college football. That's why I can talk to you about Old Dominion.
Right.
Talk about their left tackle. We can talk about Old Dominion's left tackle. But I don't even follow the NFL, even here in Cleveland. I grew up a Browns fan, huge Browns fan, hate the Pittsburgh Steelers, hate the rivalry, but I don't even follow the NFL. So I don't know who's going to win more games this year.
Do you like the elf, the Cleveland guy, elf mascot thing? Do you like that?
I grew up a Browns fan. Jim Brown, I was 4 years old when Jim Brown was playing. So I was very, very young. And just watching him play, I was hooked. The Browns were a massive, they were the best team in football from 1950 all the way through 1970, yes. Right in that area. And then the Steelers took over after that. But I grew up with nothing but Browns dominance when I was a child.
Okay, so two-parter to end the conversation. The first is, I guess both involving Texas, but this is the last year for Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists in the middle part of the country who believe that Texas and Oklahoma may not get a fair shake during Big 12 play, and that's why their win total might be a little bit suspect to bet the over. How do you feel about the last year in a conference that's not too happy to watch them walk to the SEC?
I picked Texas and Oklahoma actually to be in the Big 12 title game this year, and it is my biggest concern. You go back to last year, I think Texas played Oklahoma State, and I think there was some like 13 penalties on Texas, none on Oklahoma State. Have you guys ever seen a game like that before?
Yeah,
so you worry about that. Everybody's going to give their best shot to them. Texas has a tough schedule. But if I'm looking at over-unders between the two, let me delve into Oklahoma. What do you got in Oklahoma at right now, 9.5?
10.5, no?
No,
that's great.
9.5 or 10.
Okay. Oklahoma, when I went over the team with Coach Venables, the defense last year gave up 461 yards per game, 30 points per game. That is unacceptable to him. He's a defensive coach. He brought in a ton of transfers. His system is complex. He threw the whole thing at the defense last year, and they struggled a little bit. Now they're in the second year of the system. They brought in a ton of transfers. They're going to be much improved there. They've got Dylan Gabriel back at QB. When he missed a couple games last year, they struggled. And then the offensive line solid. They are loaded across the board. They play a soft schedule in the Big 12, a much easier schedule than Texas does. They miss some of the key teams out there. And in fact, if you go and look at Vegas right now, the games Oklahoma is favored in, they are favored in 11 of the 12 games this year. Yep. The only game they're not favored in is Texas. So 9.5. I'm going to go.
Which is a neutral site game. I mean, it's not even a home game, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So I like the over more for Oklahoma, but I think Texas is the better team. But Texas actually is the only team in the Big 12. Of the Big 12's top 6 teams, they're the only one that has to play each of the other top 5, showing that the Big 12 is giving them no parting gift. If you're looking for the best schedule in the Big 12, go to Oklahoma State. They actually play 6 teams that were group of 5 teams last year, or non-power 5. They avoid all the big boys practically this year and get Oklahoma at home. So Oklahoma State might be your value play in the Big 12.
Are they a legit? Are they good though, Phil? Like their schedule's good, but are they good? I've been hearing a lot of people keep giving me this Oklahoma State play. Do they have the talent to win?
You got some guy, first of all, Mike Gundy as the head coach who knows how to win.
He's got a great head of hair.
They were at one point last year, guys. This team was 7-1. And number 9 in the country. And then they just lost their last couple of games. If Alan Bowman does well, and I think he will at the quarterback position, they have talent around him. Now, they're not the overly experienced, but last year's defense only had 4 starters back. This year they have 6. I think they're improved, especially on the offensive line. A much better offensive line this year. I've got them a 3-point dog at Iowa State. a 3-point dog at UCF, and a 3-point dog against Oklahoma. Those are the only games they have them a dog. And 3-point dog, guys, that's basically almost a toss-up game. So I do like the value there on Oklahoma State. And yeah, Mike Gundy surprised me last year. I didn't think their team would get anywhere near 7-1, and there they were, 7-1, number 9 in the country.
All right, we'll end it with this. I've made one bet so far for college football games. It's week 2. Texas at Alabama. I've already taken the 7 points here for Texas. I don't think they win the game. I know all the numbers for Nick Saban are ridiculous in non-conference games against his former assistant coaches, all of that. Texas almost beat Alabama last year. They were at home. Now they're on the road. Can Texas keep it close against Alabama in week 2?
My number on the game was Alabama -7. So it's one where Vegas put it exactly where I thought it should be in this one. I think if it's under 7, I'm going to take Bama at home. And if it's over 7, I'd probably lean with Texas. Right now, they've got the number, which is right where it should be at 7. So I can't argue with your bet there, but once again, I can't advocate it either because I got the number at 7.
Phil, thank you for joining us. If folks want to buy the magazine, where can they go and get it?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's, in years past, you could go all over the place, Walmart, Kroger's, places like that. But this year it's exclusively at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. And then also in Vegas, the Gamblers Book Club. So those would be the 3 places to get it. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and Gamblers Book Club. But also, if you go online at philsteele.com and order it, we're going to charge you a shipping charge for the magazine because it costs to ship things naturally. But we give you the digital magazine for free when you order the hard copy online. And the digital magazine's actually updated all the way through the start of September. So example, you flip open the digital magazine right now. Who's the coach of Northwestern? David Braun. My magazine's got Pat Fitzgerald, but it's David Braun. And we circle players as they're out for the year. So I think you'll find that very useful to get both magazines for the one cost. Or, like I said, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Gamblers Book Club are all great places to get it.
Phil, thank you for the time. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the season. Should be here before we know it.
Hey, thanks a lot. A lot of fun talking football with you guys today.
Excellent work, sir. Thank you.